Aha. Omatake up here. Opetua state up here. Okay, Elijah Hopkins Demie. Hello, relatives. Again, this is Elijah Hopkins. Say good day to each and every one of you. Again, I invited Tanshi Jeremy Red Eagle to join us for a conversation on our land-based learning podcast series to talk a little bit about different things. I think today, December 26th, we wanted to talk a little bit about hunting as part of the land based learning discussion moving forward, because our hunting, again, it ties into the land, the animals. There's just a lot connected to preparation for hunting, the actual hunting, the methods, and whether it's depending upon the animal itself, they're all a little different in the land that they inhabit. In order to be a successful hunter, we have to have a good relationship with the land and understanding the animal habits. And so maybe with that, Tahanshi, I'll go ahead and let you maybe kind of explain a little bit about your relationship with hunting, and just kind of let the conversation go wherever it goes. Wow.
Gotcha. Yeah. So for me, hunting is a big part of like my life and my family and my boys and my dad. Growing up, it was the earliest memories that I have, being 4, 5, 6 years old and following my dad when he would go out and hunt for deer mostly. Growing up, that was primarily what I was raised hunting was mule deer. Even though my dad had experience with hunting other wild game. And then as I got older, it just was such a part of me that I wanted to expand that and to learn different animals, how to hunt them, and their habitats, all these different things that are connected to it. Um, but then it was also a big deal for me to teach that to my children, and so my older boys, they're definitely really big into hunting, and seeing them go off into their own direction of what they're doing with it. Today I think we live in a different time where a lot of they refer to it as the hunting industry, and you have videos, all these things that outfitters, all of this, it's kind of like a money game for people to be able to make a living at you know the hunting, 24/7 or whatever throughout the year. And me, I kind of like don't get too caught up into all of that stuff. I just really like having the simple connection of being out on the land. Myself personally, I'm not, there's something exciting when get to shoot a big buck or a big bull elk or anything like that. But for me, it's more of, just the experience of being out on the land and doing things ethically and morally, and really learning as you go of what that even entails, because we've been so far disconnected from our traditional forms of hunting and sustaining ourselves through those methods, that I think we have a lot of work to do to relearn some of those things. And then also, as times change, things change, our landscapes change, climate change, all of these different things that we're dealing with. So it's, for me personally, it's constantly, like assessing those things and what it looks like, and um, really just trying to reconnect with that. Because I think about like my grandchildren right now. I'm blessed to have 13 grandkids currently, and only two. Well, I have a couple grandsons. One that I live by, and so he's only two. But like that's my goal, is to already get that ingrained in his mind, and to raise him and teach him the right way, of how I understand how hunting should be. I believe that it's something that all young people, specifically young boys, but even females, to expose them to. And there's reasons why. One, the most important, I believe, is just teaching them that they can be a provider, that they can provide food for their loved ones, and what that looks like, especially in uncertain times that we live in. I think that that's really important. And growing up, I had so many friends, peers that I grew up around that didn't have a positive male role model, or just male role models that maybe didn't hunt or know those things. And so for a lot of my friends, it was kind of a foreign thing that they just didn't get to have that experience. So as I've been older, I've been able to uh, take younger, like nephews or other, young men in the community out and take them out for their first time ever hunting, and just being able to, hear the excitement or just the experience of being able to be out there and what that all entails, is just really it's pretty cool. And I think that's it's just really important, for young people to be able to experience that. And because with a young man, you're telling him, that you are worthy, that you are, that you have a gift, that you're capable of, doing these things. And so a long time ago, that's what it was. Young men were expected to be able to provide for their families. And when you were little, it started out with the small game or the things that were a little bit easier, simpler to do. And then as you get older, it's of course turned into more of the, hunting big game, elk, buffalo, things like that. And today we're fortunate we still get to experience the buffalo hunts. Those are coming back. It's nothing like how it used to be, but it's still that connection and that, building that relationship that we once had with, Pteoyate. So those are just some of the kind of things that I'm into and, trying to do in my community with the young people today. As soon as we're done here, I have a young guy. I'm going to take him out. And I myself, I've never snared rabbits, but we're going to go try it out. We're going to go set some snares and, just been doing some research and talking to different people that have done it. And so, he's 12 years old. So I think it's a good place to start, getting him out there. And that's the cool thing about hunting is we just have all this, different times all the way from early fall all the way through winter. Deer season's over, but we can still go out and trap and do, different things like that. Trapping was a big deal for our people. Here on the Lake Traverse Res, there's only a couple people left that do it, and that still retain a lot of that knowledge. So I'm trying to learn about that. Myself personally, I'm not into trapping to sell furs and things like that. And even though people do it, they need to. It's their income. To me, I just want to have the knowledge of how to do it, and then being able to take those furs and use them myself personally to make things or whatever. So, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. And then of course the bow, that's new to me. Growing up, I didn't get into bow hunting, even though I had always wanted to. So that's somewhat new for me. But then now I want to even take it further and be able to utilize bow and arrows that we make ourselves to be able to hunt with, as opposed to just the modern, recurves and longbows and things like that. But yeah, there's bow hunting is definitely more intimate and more it just has a different feel to it. I think rifle season, when rifle season starts, and anybody that's familiar knows, if you're living in a place where there's a lot of hunters, it almost sounds like a war zone out there when opening day starts. And me, I don't really like that. So that's the cool thing about bow hunting is you don't experience that. Even though there's a big influx in bow hunters nowadays, there's still, the solitude of being out there. And this year I got a chance to shoot at a buck. Even though I missed it, it was still like just something about that experience, being within 10-15 yards of an animal like that, and just having that connection to it is pretty amazing, even if you do miss it. And then of course our elk hunt and everything that happened there, that was just it was a rush, man. And it's addictive, when you get to on that next level, I think, of being a hunter. So yeah, my goal is to continue to keep improving and learning that stuff so I can raise my grandchildren to be that way, so it's just a part of who they are.
Mashtinjana yate. But yeah, when I think of, you know, hunting, I too was raised. My earliest memories was My dad and one of my uncles took me out. I was about 3 years old. Honestly, knowing how my dad was back in those days, he was a kind of a crazier guy. Now he's settled down. He's in a good way. But I remember we'd probably out poaching someplace. But I remember going out and then they shot a muley deer and it still had the velvet on its horns. I remember being like 3 years old. And, they took it and they were dressing it out. And first thing, went and grabbed the liver. My dad said, "Come here, son." He said, "Time for you to be a man now." 3 years old, but then he told me to take a bite of that liver, and then I just remember my eyes watering and gag reflex. But what he was trying to do was that old tradition of even though I think I was probably a bit young to be doing that, but it was I still remember it though, man. I think it was important that idea of being connected to the animal. I think some people probably romanticize that a bit too much, but that's part of our tribal tradition is when we, especially your first kill is to be connected to that animal to show that respect. And so I think anybody that's listening to this, whether you're a student or community member, kind of be aware of that as you choose to pick up the ways of hunting and sharing this way. I think is important that we always kind of have that at the forefront of our thought process, man. Whether that's putting tobacco out and eating part of that liver. Some people like take part of the heart, but there's a lot of nutrition in that. But I think that's just an old custom. The other thing when I was listening to you talk to Hunchy was so like with our rifle hunting, the beauty of that, I guess, is that almost anybody can do it because with rifles, as you know, maybe minimal training, 100 yards, you can take out almost any land mammal in the United States with a little bit of training and a rifle with a high enough caliber. You could even go out farther, two, three, four, five, six, 700 yards. Some people, they get really into it. But the beauty of snaring, especially, but like definitely with bow hunting, and even there's levels in bow hunting too with compounds or just regular old Ikuche, Tazipa is like you need to get within 10 to 30 yards realistically, maybe 50, 70 with higher compounds, but it really forces us to get close and to play all those variables, whether it's the wind, just being quiet, understanding the times of the day to hunt. Whereas I think we become so disconnected with the rifle and the comfort level of just staying in your truck, driving, and then even like almost hurting deer. It's really common. I'm not trying to talk bad about people that do that. It's just like it's a different method, it's a different style. And so by doing that, I think we've become after a few generations of doing that, that's become to where we've lost that connection with these animals because now we're having to relearn how to do that. And so the beauty of that is that with our land-based learning project, hopefully we can talk about our experiences. And you talked about that last week too, Tahanshi, is true knowledge is direct experience with whatever it is, whatever the topic is, man, being able to speak to that. So from my experience, the knowledge that we've gained, even through the elk hunt specifically, is that it forces us to be prepared. It took me honestly a couple years, man, of like, and I even had all this fancy equipment and I was out there, man, and downloading these apps and all this stuff. Like, but you can only do so much. That stuff only takes you so far. It really comes down to you getting out and putting the time and walking and then being prepared. Every year you learn a little bit more. You're like, oh, that's this sign is fresh, and this is um what an elk's pattern is. And so like every year you kind of get a little bit better and better. And so and what I've kind of learned from that too is just preparation, man. It's like anything you're gonna get out of it, what you put into it. And so moving forward, that's kind of it reinforces that, to be prepared, man, and not just have it be a seasonal thing. Even though the hunting is seasonal, our the preparation for it, but really it's like we have to be prepared at all times, so that way when the season's ready, we're ready. And that
Yeah.
And there's just countless examples of that. So I remember even visiting with you or some other speaker, or I remember there was a Unktomi story. And I think Unktomi's brother-in-law went to go grab him one day. I don't know if they were going to go hunting or going to go on a war party, but Unkto, he forgot his chehanaka. And then he went out and then he was running around. So there's just countless little stories that are embedded in our cultural history of being prepared. And sometimes we use those stories to like joke around about not being prepared. But honestly, not being prepared, Ehana, was the difference between life and death. It was the difference between uh, a winter of luxury, because we're in the deep winter right now and until March, And so like if you didn't gather enough tipsina and just prepare and do all these things, make enough bapa to last you through the winter, you just didn't make it. Or if you did, it was just a tough famine. It was just really difficult. And so I think that's part of it. And I think with the preparation now, it really reinforces the idea that we have to be physically prepared. We have to be. And so like with going back to this rifle hunting, and while it's good for anybody of almost any age level and body type and whatnot, and ability level, physical ability level, they can get out, they can hunt, and that's good. But what I'd really encourage any of you that are listening to this, if you are an able-bodied person, or if you are educating or parenting younger people, that's I think the really should be the goal, is to prioritize something like archery hunting. You can still hunt with a rifle and use those same tactics to get close. But really, honestly, like when you're in the moment, you see an enemy, that might kind of go out the window. A bow forces you to get close because there's no way you're going to make a 100-yard shot. You have to get within 50, 30 yards. And so I think that's the beauty of that. And then, and just from my personal experience, being my age now, like I have to stay on top of kind of what I eat a little bit more so that way I'm ready year round for the elk hunting season in the fall. And I think it's really forced me to look at my diet, um, and just being prepared, man. I think, um, I don't know what you think about that, Tahanshi, but I think that's one of the key takeaways from where we're at, because I think the Missouri River breaks. That's like one of the most pristine areas in the country, man. And it was like amazing experience for people to get in there. Because when we're hiking, man, we've had what, maybe a day pack on, and it isn't like walking out on a stubble field. It's you're going up and down and up and down. And so like every day, I think we're out there about 4 days, even just on our lax days, 4 or 5 miles a day. And the day we harvested an elk, I think we were 2, 3 miles back. That's up and down, stepping over rattlesnakes, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then, um, so we get an elk, and then we debone it right on the spot, right? And that was a learning experience because there's different tactics, different ways to do it, but realistically, you can't take out a whole elk, even with two guys. And when you're 3, 4 miles back, however far we were, and you're going up and down hills. And so that was a workout, man. That really like told me that if this is something I want to do, I have to be prepared for it. And even honestly by myself if need be. But
Yeah. Kushi used to share with me, she said, like, because we would talk about like as a man, making bow and arrows and stuff. And she would she would say that. She said, yeah, one of our old teachings was you don't wait until your camp is being attacked to start making your arrows. you know so yeah, we have to be prepared. And I like what you said about, because I have a 30-30 lever action that I like to rifle hunt with, and it's really good for in the brush, but then out on the prairie, it's not the best rifle, when you're talking distance. But I thought about that, and I was like growing up rifle hunting, you don't force yourself to get that discipline of being able to get right up on an animal, because you don't have to. If you're within 100 yards, and of course further out, but at 100 yards, that's golden. There's no excuse not to miss. But with a bow, it forces you to get close. So then I was thinking that this year, it's like, man, I should just really start to challenge myself when I do rifle hunt during the season, rifle season, to challenge getting closer than I normally do. But it definitely just has a complete different feel to it than when there's such thing as target panic. And I don't think that is related to like the certain individual. Sometimes it just happens, where people get this excitement or whatever it is that can cause a person to have target panic. But I noticed that this year, the difference between when I rifle hunt and when I was bow hunting, it was so intimate and you were so close to the animal, yet I don't feel like ever having any kind of, being rushed, anxiety, like nothing like that. It was just a different feel to it, which is weird because I would think that it would be the opposite, but it wasn't. And the other thing, going back to the experience part, was that when I shot at this buck and I missed, it's the first time that I'd ever actually officially shot my bow at an animal, other than like a rabbit or something when I was younger. So that was a whole brand new experience to me. So for the last year or two, I've been researching, watching YouTube videos, doing all kinds of stuff to learn proper bow hunting, because everything is different, right? All these different animals are different as far as how you hunt them. So with whitetails specifically, they will hear the sound of your bowstring when you let that arrow fly. They're going to hear that, and they're going to hear it even if it's just for a split second. They're going to hear it before the arrow hits them. And so you can watch all kinds of videos online, and almost consistently they duck. And so you have to adjust your aiming to factor that in, that they are most likely going to drop at least a little bit before that arrow hits them. And the thing was, I knew that. I had researched it. I had heard people talk about it on podcasts and seen YouTube videos, but it meant nothing until I experienced it. Now I know. Now there's no way that I will ever forget that I have to factor that in when I pull my arrow back to let it go. And so that's that part of that experience, that we can have all the fancy gear and we can listen to all the podcasts we want, but until you're out there doing it, that's part of the process. And that's what I said. I was excited. Like, I didn't, like, had I missed that deer with a rifle, I would have been mad at myself. But missing it with an arrow, especially my first time, I was excited for days afterward at the fact that I was even able to get a shot off that one. Because I think to a lot of people, it may seem like this is, going to be extremely challenging and would take years to even get to that point. But I don't think so. I think that if you're serious about it and you get out there and you put in the time and the effort and you're prepared, you're going to be able to experience those things. And I think that that's what separates a lot of people in hunting, is that, like, whether it's elk hunting in general, because elk are extremely difficult to hunt, or bow hunting any kind of animal, but specifically deer or any large game like that, is putting in the work. And that's what a lot of people say. That's why with bow hunting, the success rate is like 10% or something crazy. But I think it's a matter of people putting in the work. Elk, you have to chase them. So in order to do that, you have to be in shape. Rifle season's different, man. If you know where they're at, and even then with elk, you probably are still gonna have to put in some miles, even during rifle season. But bow season, you definitely are gonna have to. And we experience that. They're moving and we're coming up behind them, and we just have to keep chasing them and chasing them. And they even talk about where we have to be quiet. You don't want to, give yourself away, but there are times within elk hunting where you have to run. There's times when you have to, like, be on top of it because they're moving, and you have to be able to stay caught up with them until you get that perfect opportunity to be able to get a shot off. And then there's differences with the hunting in that sense, that there's, posting up and just staying put. and then there's spot and stock where you're moving and you have to put in actual work into being able to be successful with it. So yeah, I think being prepared and the physical part of it, I was fortunate, firefighting most of my life to where it's natural for me. But at my age, that was a wake up call when we had to haul that elk out. That next year I need to be in better shape, because then I was like, what if that thing was even bigger than what it was? That would have been a lot of work.
Yeah, especially a big bull. Exactly how much bigger that'd be? Significantly more weight, and then yeah, even I want to say a couple years ago, I would buy these reeds, see it on these like YouTube videos, people calling, you hear about it all the time, bugling, all this stuff. And so I remember the first few times I went out, I would hear them. And that's what I think separates elk from deer and probably moose. And I don't think any other animal really bugles the same way. I know buffalo, I've gotten up close to buffalo herds. I tried harvesting a buffalo and they'll bellow. I know white-tailed deer will make kind of these weird little grunt sounds, but like
Mm-hmm.
they're nothing like elk. Elk, they're like, and I see why they represent during the rut season. I believe it's Uyohiampata, like that direction. When you listen to people and pray, that's kind of like the what the elk represents. And I even asked Elder Jerome Killsmall, and he told me that it was like it represents like what you call it when a male elk, they have that bravado or that their ability to swoon the ladies, I guess you would say. But like that's a characteristic he said that we want our people to have. He was talking about that each direction he was saying has an animal and it has what it represents. Like the north to the north is the buffalo, and they want our young people to be strong, like the buffalo, to be charismatic, is what he said, like the elk. And so taking on some of these attributes. But when we were out there, and I remember being like less than 100 yards from our herd bull and all these satellite bulls, and they're screaming at each other. Like I'd heard people talking about that, but now we're connecting our lived experience with that. And so I think that's what I think is really important. And I wish I could share that with people. But the only way anyone's gonna have that experience is if they go out themselves and kind of get that direct experience that way. Um, and even, this year earlier, like that day before we got that elk. Just, we're down. There's a lot of downtime. That's one thing. You have a lot of thoughts to yourself. And I've gone out with Tanshi Jeremy a number of times, but even there was times I'd go out by myself for like a day or two, and like it forces you to get in. There's no one to talk to. You're out there by yourself. And sometimes I remember being like, oh, what the heck am I doing out here, man? but, but those are like these little fleeting thoughts, that you have. But as I reflect back on it, you're forcing yourself to be detached from like the everyday lifestyle of like your cell phones and your work, family life. And so those are obviously important, but I think speaks to our mental health, and we're reconnecting, we're retapping into who we really are. And I think that's important. That's one of my main takeaways. And I want to cultivate this relationship with hunting and land-based learning for the rest of my life. But I want my children, especially my son, to integrate this at a young age, because I think it's gonna affect all the other parts of their life in a good way, because it'll promote them to have a sense of balance. And when I was out there and I'm communicating with the elk with the reed, and Hana, I don't know how if they even did call anything like that. I'm sure they did, but I was communicating with the elk, man. It was wild, and it's hard to explain that. You throw out a cow call, and all of a sudden 10, 15 seconds later, an elk bugles back. It did that, for a while. And then even the day we got the elk, I honestly, when I heard the elk that I ended up getting, I thought that was Tahanshi Jeremy doing a cow call behind me. Here it was the actual elk. So all these little variables come into play, but those are like direct experiences with these animals that I think we can take moving forward. As we reflect back on, your hunting stories and be like, oh, now we can apply this strategy moving forward based on the behavior of the animals and what we learn from it. And there was many times I almost had a bull elk earlier that same day, but I was in a rush and I think I walked out into the light. I was in some shadows and I was trying to get into a closer shot. But little things like that, these animals are very like aware and perceptive, because they probably want to live too. They've been like hunting forever or been hunted by mountain lions, people probably forever. But yeah, my main takeaway, man, is that we're tapping into, especially as tribal people, all people really, but our tribal people, we're reconnecting with our what we've been doing since forever, man. When you're talking about how you were excited with that the deer when you took, even though you missed, like my first shot on that elk, I had like a nice compound bow, a pretty fancy one, but still about 30 yards, and I still remember it vividly. I think it's because you have all these like your adrenaline, these endorphins. You're like locked into this moment. And I remember watching the arrow like fly through the air, man. It was like something out of a movie, man. It was wild. I was like, and so just to watch that arrow like fly through the air and like, you know, hit the elk, and then that whole experience, like time kind of stood still. And I think that's it. What I experienced was something that probably our ancestors since Hana had experienced with all different types of land animals, mammals throughout North America for thousands and thousands of years, man. And so it's in our DNA, it's in our identity. And I think the more that we can connect with that, I think we're just going to be a healthier people.
Yeah, I think that another thing too is like when with my experience, when you rifle hunt a lot of the times, you are like a disturbance, like you're a foreigner when you're out there, it seems. Whereas when you bow hunt, you sit out there long enough, you become a part of the landscape. And even just within moments of like really sitting still, being quiet, and just blending into everything, you just start to see things that you would probably never notice. The birds and animals and other things, because you're not just being loud and noisy and carrying on or whatever. So then their behaviors start to change because they're relaxed and more comfortable because they're not seeing you as something from the outside coming in. So I think that in and of itself is an awesome experience. But yeah, the learning about animal behavior, because I know like what we know is just the tip of the iceberg. Like it's real minimal compared to how our people, interacted with the animals. And like even the buffalo, right? Because we're told these things all the time. Those of us that, visit with elders and, learning our language and all of this stuff, we're told all the time about the significance of what we learned from the Buffalo Nation specifically, right? I was taught as a traditional dancer, we dance counterclockwise on the outside of the dance arena, right? And I was told that represents the male buffalo, the bull buffalo, because what he's doing, not only is he circling and protecting the cows and the calves and all of that, but he's going the opposite direction as everybody else in the dance circle, and it's to draw attention to himself, so that the protection of them. But there's all kinds of teachings that I was just Kushi Mary Louise Defender just told me, that's where we got Washihada, our grief, mourning, our process, waiting 4 days when we, the grief of the 4 days of mourning, and then burying our loved ones. She says that came from the Buffalo Nation, that they're the ones that taught us that. And so we know that when you go out and harvest a buffalo, you get to actually see the process and what they do. They circle around their loved one and they try to get it to stand back up, or saying their farewells, whatever it is they may do. We experienced one time where we had wounded a bull, and I think they wounded it twice actually, and we were so we jump in the truck to, like, because it takes off, man. It took off running, so we had to go and follow it. And before they could get a final shot in it, it was attempting to come into the herd, and the other bulls were forcing it out. We literally watched the bigger bull come up and ram it and push it out. And like, to us, we would think, because then that doesn't fall into like this whole romanticized idea of, how everything is in nature, that no, like there's survival. And they knew that they were in danger, and that whoever was going for that bull, by him coming into the herd, was bringing danger to the others. And so that's why they pushed him out. And that's just a reality of how natural law works, but by being able to actually see and experience those things, we just start to have a better understanding of, when our people talk about that, we are the buffalo nation, or any of these animals, that we get teachings from them, and that literally was who we were a long time ago. Our survival depended on those things. And I think today we've been just so far removed from that, and I myself, I have to remind myself that, like, people didn't grow up sometimes doing these things. And a few years ago, we harvested a kea, the big snapping turtles, and all of our elders talk about eating snapping turtle all the time. And a lot of that wasn't just survival. I think it was because they actually, enjoyed eating those things. And there's purpose and reason to that, specifically with the turtle. But we did that. We've done it a few times. But that first time we did that, and there was a bunch of people that had come, and we're all participating in it. But like, it dawned on me, like, a lot of people, they don't even know how to do simple butchering, let alone like specific animals, right? Of like, because they're all different, the way they're shaped and whatever. But just butchering an animal in general is like not a common occurrence anymore. So we have to take the time to educate and to teach, people how to do even people older than we are, maybe have never experienced that stuff. But I think that it goes to show the disconnect with our food, because everything we buy today, it's somebody else is doing that work. Somebody else is the one, killing it, butchering it, packaging it, put it in the grocery store. We go in, we buy it, and there's no thought about that animal's life. And chances are that animal came from a slaughterhouse, or, some other thing. So when people are against hunting, it doesn't make sense to me, because not all hunters, but most hunters are going to have more reverence for that animal, because they actually experience what it is to take that life. And I think that when we talk about that these things are good for us, that the meat itself is usually healthier or better, for us, compared to the stuff we buy in the store. But then also the intention, the hard work, the prayer, all of those things that are also a part of it, makes it even more so, that it's healthy for us, because we're actually putting in hard physical work into processing those animals and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I definitely do, like with the elk and the buffalo that we've harvested. This podcast series, I guess, we wanted to make sure and I guess chronicle certain projects that we're doing with some grant funding that we have, but really we want it to go beyond any particular grant, just to talk about the things that I think are connected to the land, with buffalo harvest, elk hunting. My wife Samantha does plant walks, gathering medicines, and all that has to do with sourcing your food yourself. And I know that there's a certain type of like pride, man. Like I felt, man, like being Chashta, man, like providing for my family, and like sitting around watching my children, my three small children, and my wife eat some soup with the elk or the buffalo that we help harvest, especially the elk, man, just because it's so hard to get up on it, man. It was like to source that animal, it just felt good. And so I think, and it isn't like a bragging thing. It's just like you're like, wow, I seen this animal from the beginning stages, and I'm starting to normalize that even with conversations with my children. My youngest one's 4 years old, and so and Sage, she's just like it's becoming like a normal thing to eat buffalo and elk. And how cool is that?
Yeah.
So we're changing back to what it is, our normal palette of food, and even the discussions around it, man. Because and I hate to like dwell on this, but it's just so common for people to resist game food, wild game. And I don't like using that term, but like elk, deer, all these foods besides pig, cow, or anything besides that wild game. It's not sourced at a grocery store. That's how our mind has become completely twisted into what it should be the opposite way. Oh, I'm eating bacon and sausage, but instead, so many people they won't even try the food, man. And even if you spice it up and it tastes great, but like it's just the idea that it's a buffalo. But how is that different than a cow? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't like make sense. I mean, it does, but at the same time, it's a frustration that I have when we put all this time and effort in our communities, and probably similar in other communities as well. But at our tribal college, when we put up events and we're sourcing our local foods that have like buffalo, elk, things of that nature, deer, moose, and then people resist that. I don't mean to like berate them or anything, but it's just what it tells me got some work to do to
Hmm.
change like the mindset and the mentality of the community to start eating that way. And I don't like to use the term like living that way but like in ways it is it's about becoming a healthier, and it doesn't mean like an Indian, but becoming a connected person to the land, however you want to uh, make that association. But I think there's just a lot of community education. But I think people like you, me, other people that have been doing this for years, I think the goal should be to just continually normalizing it. Not like we talked about the last time we talked. It ain't just ceremony food. This is our food.
Yeah.
All food is sacred because it's nourishing our body. Last week I had a couple gentlemen from Standing Rock came in. I put it out as a like a podcast episode, I guess, last week, just because there were parts in there and some of the audio wasn't very great. There was a lot of good things that they discussed in there as it relates to the land and hunting. And I think part of that has to do with just normalizing the food. And then when asked them to what was it, Brian Swiftcloud, he shared a prayer. Uh, Oyute Olowa is what he
Mm.
called. And that was beautiful, man. And the words, man, is like it all has to do with nourishing our body. Asking the creator to help us with this food and to bless it. And so I think normalizing that more and more so and explaining through education what does the song mean? What does the prayer mean? And it all has to do with this food and so not that cows and pigs can't nourish our body, but they're not as clean.
Hmm.
They're not the way that we used to. Our diets were made for thousands of years, and so I think that's one of the main things. And even something as simple as it almost kind of to me defeats the purpose. Let's say you get a buffalo, elk, deer. They're lean animals. They don't have a lot of fat on them, and so I notice a lot of people want to take a bunch of pork fat and mix it in there, but I'm against it, to be honest, man. I mean, it's better than them not eating at all, but at the same time, I think my goal is to not mess with that at all. So anytime I get any wild game, deer, elk, buffalo, you can go out and buy buffalo tallow. If you're able to harvest your own animal, if you're able to source that, and I haven't got to that level yet or that type of understanding to start sourcing that tallow from the fat and turn it into tallow. That way you can use it to cook.
Yeah.
You can buy it. I bought some buffalo tallow a while back. It lasts forever. So anytime you have some ground up buffalo meat, just throw that in there, man. Those are simple practices that I think we can in every day start utilizing our food.
Yeah, I actually made some. I got a hind quarter off someone this fall, and that's what I did with it. I made tallow out of it, and use it to cook, and it's healthier for you than all of this stuff that and even in the health scene, they'll come out with some new thing that you're supposed to be doing, and then years later they'll be like, oh no, never mind, don't do that. Use this. And I always tell people, because there's so many different what do you call them, like these diet things that are out there. Most of them to me are just schemes, but some of them, may be more legit. But you have your carnivore diet and your keto and Jenny Craig, whatever it is. You have all these different diet things. But to me, it's common sense that as Native people, what did our people eat? Because we know that our people lived long, healthy lives. They were strong. And so we need to do the best we can in today's modern world to mimic that. And that can be challenging. It can be really difficult, but we have to get to that point. Today, even the majority of the people that make wojapi, they're making it out of store-bought berries, as opposed to taking choke cherries and grinding them up and doing it old school, not adding a bunch of sugar and stuff like that to it. Um, but yeah, the tallow, using it to cook with, is way better than any of these seed oils and different things that you're gonna spend an arm and a leg for, in a health food store or whatever it may be. And then we know for a fact that the vegetable oils are the worst for us.
Seed oils is what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're literally killing ourselves with our diet, and then we have that mentality because we grew up that way. Our parents grew up that way. Our grandparents, a lot of them, just really eating crap food. And so we continue to do it even when we may be in a financial situation where we don't have to continue to eat that way, but we still choose to. So reconnecting with that. So I had almonds and pumpkin seeds, and they were just raw. Like didn't have no salt added to, nothing like that. I bought them from the health food store, and I bought them just like that. And I took the tallow and actually one of the bone marrow from one of those bones you gave me, and I ate that bone marrow. But as I was heating it up in my cast iron pan, a lot of that, the stuff that wasn't so solid, had leaked out into the pan, and it was all over in there. And so I took those almonds and those pumpkin seeds, and I threw them in that pan and
Ah,
cooked them, roasted them like that, and then took some healthy mineral salt and put it in there with some pepper. And holy cow, man, that was really good. But it's a matter of just experimenting with those things and really like breaking ourselves from this way we've been conditioned to operate for so many years. And so the biggest part of that is reconnecting with those animals that we harvest. And I really look up to when I was in Alaska the summer before last, and got invited to one home, and there was an old Kushi there. She was in her 80s, told us how she grew up out in the bush. She still, even in her 80s, would still go out and snare rabbits, because that was just the everyday thing that they had to do to provide in between, getting large game, was the smaller game. But they that hunting lifestyle was a part of who they are. It still is to this day. It's a part of who they are, and they do it because they really have to. Their food is scarce up there. I mean, as far as like modern grocery store food, and then when it is there, it's expensive. So they still live that way. And so I really look at around at our people down here in the lower 48, and we have all these talks about decolonization and all this awesome work that everybody's doing to reconnect with who we are as a people, and the land-based teachings or whatever it may be that people are doing. But I think that that's the biggest disconnect that we have today, is reconnecting with our food, because we're not in a situation where we have to rely on those things. We could eat commodities. We could go to the food bank if we're on the poor. Grocery stores, fast food, all of these things that are everywhere. We're surrounded by food today. Like, it's hard for a person to go hungry in America in today's world. Uh, but it's because all of the food is crap. It's not, and it actually is extremely expensive to go and buy healthy food from the grocery store. So your best bet is, the food sovereignty idea of, harvesting, whether it's the plants and, the roots and all of that, or hunting. But then you are providing that stuff for yourself. And then taking it a step further and learning about all of the different parts and how to use them. So it's not just the meat, right? Like whether it's other things that are used in the animal. Of course, we talk about the organs. Those are some of the most nutrient rich meats that you can eat. And there's a reason. So when we talked about Uncle Larry having you take a bite of the liver, there was a purpose for those things. But in all honesty, that's just what they did. Like it wasn't just to honor the first kill. Like that's what they did. Like they ate those things raw all the time because of the nutrients that are in those. So how do we get our young people to reconnect with those things and do that? I was just watching a thing this guy put a post out and he had harvested a deer and he had found it's like it's almost like a stone, but they're light and it's like the shape of a ball and it forms inside of their stomach. I didn't know that deer did that, but he actually had a picture of it and everything. But buffalo do that. And like I've heard, like a Crow and Blackfeet and these other tribes, I've never heard like our people talk about that, even though I'm sure they had to have knowledge of it. But now, in it, because I had forgotten about it, but those Blackfeet and Crow and others, they would talk about those buffalo stones, and that's what they are. They're something that I don't know the science behind it, but they form inside of the stomach of the buffalo. So just learning about those things, and then they had different purposes and uses for those. That Arlo and Lisa Ironcloud, they travel around and do all of those harvesting of the buffalo, and just seeing their growth. Because when she first started doing that, from what I understand, she was new to it, right? So she didn't like grow up with all of those teachings. It was something that she had to seek out. But now recently they've been putting posts out where they get into it and they break it down, taking certain parts of the animal apart and like what's the most effective way to do it, and then how can you utilize those things, making your own bone marrow and all of that, the collagen, because that's something like if you're somebody who's into like lifting or kind of living that healthy lifestyle, all these supplements that they're selling in the store, we have the ability to make those things with the stuff that we harvest off these animals.
It would probably be better
Yes.
because what
Yeah.
they do is they take random like animals like in factory settings and then just take all these crazy cartilage pieces and smash them all together and turn it into a powder and
Yep.
repackage it and sell it back to us.
Yep.
That's probably not the healthiest way. So I think getting back to sourcing our own animal parts, I think that's exactly it, man. Like I know me and my wife, we've been trying to do that as well. Drying stuff where we can. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge. Like you learn a lot, man. And I think when you were talking earlier, I think more sometimes or less is more
Yeah.
sometimes. Because I get like caught, I'm like, oh God, I gotta research the latest scientific stuff on like food and like all this stuff. And like you feel like you're constantly in this missing out on like the next big fad thing. And I think the main thing is to remember that that's all it really is. And I mean, you can spend, and it probably is some like nutritional benefits of getting into it. And I think certain people are built that way to research information like super academically like that. And hey, that's good, man. But I think getting back to simple things like less is more sometimes is like just getting back into understanding the animal and trying to challenge yourself to like eat as much of it as possible instead of just the choice cuts. You know,
Yep.
you're talking about the bone marrow, the cartilage, all that stuff has nutritional value. Um, yeah, and then I also think a mentality that we have to be really aware of because they say we're in a food desert. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but a food desert, that's like one of those terms through uh, that you hear about like in certain areas where there isn't grocery stores, convenience stores that have fruits and vegetables and organic stuff, all this stuff. they might have processed food, but that's a term that people use in like industry to sell things. And I noticed that that term's been utilized a lot. Um, and I understand what they're saying. They're what they're saying is that if you don't hunt and if you don't source your own food, somewhere like in Poplar or maybe in Sisseton, you're in a food desert because you don't have a whole market foods and all these places to go in. But I think what that does, that type of thinking, it kind of makes you feel like you need to move to the cities and go to those stores and like that's like the answer. When really they're 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 sending the wrong messaging, man. And maybe to for people that choose to live in a city urban lifestyle and they can afford that and that's like your thing, sure. But like 90% of the population in the United, almost every native definitely on the reservations and like close to reservations, that's probably not realistic. What is realistic is just going outside. And most of us live in pretty rural areas. And it's your opportunity to educate yourself on what the landscape looks like. Naturally, we do have to be aware of um, places that are polluted. You know, a lot of our reservations, there was like a lot of mining and all this type of stuff that, so be aware of that. But in general, I think through that process of educating yourself, you're able to like source foods, and you can really kind of empower yourself to have like a clean, healthy diet, man. That it is going to cost some money. It might cost you time away from your PS5, your phone, all this stuff, right? You're going to have to go in and turn it into a lifestyle. I think that's one of the big challenges that a lot of us face. And I've had to like, be realistic with myself and look at some of my habits as well, man, and be like, I still do some of those things, but I have to etch out time. All of us are capable of doing that. I think if you're listening, that's like probably a takeaway is to understand that I think if that's something that you want to do or you're able to do, that it's going to take time. And I think connecting with other people and learning with other people is huge.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing when you were talking about the pollution part, that's another thing we have to think about because whether it's the hunting or foraging, harvesting, the plants and stuff, like here in Siston, we have all this agriculture. So we have corn and soybean fields everywhere. And of course, they spray those with pesticides and all of that kind of stuff. So, like that to me, like I don't like that, right? But that deer meat is still, in my opinion, is still going to be healthier than the beef or the pork because those things are not only are they eating the same, the crops that these things are being grown with that stuff, similar to the deer, but they're also being injected directly with all kinds of stuff that we
But
have no clue about,
yeah,
you
steroids.
know?
I think they do stuff like with vaccines,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of crazy stuff. Because
Yeah,
and then even like with the vegetable stuff that you're hearing, like they'll spray it with a certain chemical with water in the grocery store itself to keep
exactly.
from like wilting and weathering. And then what do 99% of us do? We don't wash it off. We just start throwing it. I don't know. I'm like, and
Yep.
sometimes I even know that. Sometimes I still do it. So like, yeah, there's definitely some work to be done, man. But I think I got to wrap it up here in a second. I'm getting texts from my 9-year-old wants to play me Monopoly. I told her we're on winter break here, but the one thing I remember listening to you talk about these stones. So that's really interesting about this buffalo stones because when you said that, I'm automatically thinking of like most a lot of birds like turkeys, prairie chickens. They have those like stones in their throats. That's how they like digest. I'm thinking maybe that has what the buffalo and the deer do. They do. They probably like swallow more of a rounded pebble, and maybe it probably helps with digestion at a practical level. But I don't know. That's really interesting, man. I'm gonna have to like visit with some people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And then in the future, whenever you harvest those things, man, we got to start looking and
oh,
seeing if we can find them.
100%. 100%, man. And even like the last buffalo I helped to harvest. I was visiting, was it? It was Yeah, you Tashi, Jeremy. There was an interview from a guy named Rex Flying, 1940s, 50s out of Fort Belknap. And just the things that they would do with the buffalo that we've completely forgotten about. And I've even visited with other people, like how they would take the esophagus out of a buffalo and they would use that as the pipe stem. They would take the chamber of their heart, that big chamber, and they would use that as a bowl. They'd fashion it as a bowl. They would connect that. That was one of their pipes that the old Assiniboine would use pre-reservation era. And I could go on and on about some of these other things, like the way that they made arrows for warfare with poison tips, and it's just like things that I've never heard anybody talk about. I've visited with other tribal historians about like primitive, use the word primitive, but just like the old societies, hunting and warfare societies of our tribal people. And those things just aren't. So there's information and knowledge that's stored away, but I want to be able to revive some of that stuff. And the only way we're going to be able to do it, we can't just talk about it. We have to actually like etch out time and start looking for these things. So part of that is with the looking for those stones, um, and just doing our best to try and use all of the animal. Like every time we've harvested these buffalo, I think we're getting a little bit closer to doing that. It just takes time. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, Tanshi, I appreciate your time. We'll go ahead and wrap it up and then hopefully we can visit next week. But appreciate you, Dokstake.
Oh, Doc